Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of the YouTube show and podcast, None of Our Businesses, where we look at the latest in business news, tax news, sometimes accounting news, and we look at that news all from the perspective of accountants, not just one accountant, but three accountants. I'm Ty Carr, and with me today is Charlie Zygmunt.
Hi, everybody.
And Jack DiMatteo.
Hello.
So what are we going to talk about today? Well, the space race has become privately funded enterprise. Or has it really? Mom and pop businesses struggle with people not returning to work. Over 40% of people may quit their jobs this year. Retailers require masks or not to require masks. It's a dilemma being faced across the country. Traffic laws not being well enforced. One idea, we need more rhyming traffic signs. All right, well, let's kick this off with Charlie.
All right, so I've got an article we can talk about from a site called Boondoggle, which is new to me, so I've not vetted this source, but it's called the Not So Private Space Race. And what it's all about is earlier this month, Richard Branson of Virgin Atlantic went 50 miles up in the air in a spaceship, and then Jeff Bezos followed suit, but decided had to do everything a little better, so he went 60 miles up. And this led to this big discussion of whether or not this privatized space race is good for society. Kind of this sentiment that is it good to spend this much money on something that feels impractical at a time when we have all this real life suffering down on Earth that could be addressed better with those funds. And, the kind of consensus of the article is that it would be one thing if it was funded entirely by private money, because that's what the kind of the facade is. That's what it looks like. But it's really not, because there are a lot of subsidies and different kinds of incentives that these companies receive. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the article, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the size, the article talks about how Blue Origin got $72 million in federal subsidies. SpaceX got $3 million in subsidies, but also $106 million in federal loans. And then there's a separate part of the article where it discusses the contracts that they've also received, which are much larger, but I think also a little bit more debatable in terms of whether or not that's support, because they're government contracts where the companies were, supposed to be outputting something. So it should have been a trade there, but we'll see. There was a Senate-approved a bill recently that included $10 billion with a B for Blue Origin after Bezos, according to the article, threw a fit that SpaceX was chosen for a contract for a moon lander instead of his firm. So that bill is still pending in the House at the time of the article. But I guess I want to open it up to you guys and just kind of get a feel of I guess the question that comes to my mind is, should there be any form of government subsidy coming to these private space companies? What do you guys think?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think, our representative here in Oregon, true to form, you saw that Blumenauer immediately jumped on the idea of taxing them going to space. Did you see that one where it was like, okay, they're going to make a bunch of money off rich people who have these trips to space, so we're going to tax that. And so, yeah, I'm not necessarily, I thought that was kind of ridiculous before the program barely even gets started. We're already, looking to figure out a way to tax them is just really seems kind of ridiculous on that end. But I think subsidizing them on the other end would also be ridiculous. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, I don't foresee a need to subsidize them.
It's funny. I think you brought it full circle, and just in your narrative of the article, because as you're talking through and you're talking about $3 million subsidies and stuff like that, I'm thinking, my God, that's why the space program has always been a government run program, because and you finally brought it full circle at the last thing when you talked about the 10 billion with the B. It costs a ton of money. There's nobody private on this earth who's going to do a true space program out of their own pocket. So I almost think some of this is wink, wink. They're continuing the space program under the guise that it's private. But let's face it, the kind of money it takes to launch something into space is, there's not too many private citizens. Obviously, they've got two of the bigger names headlining it, which could, I guess, on some level, give it some credibility that it really is them funding it. But let's face it, that it's always been a government function. And again, I think the real money's probably coming from them in the first place. And something like this is not going to happen without government hands on it. For crying out loud, you can't fly a crop duster without filing a flight plan with some federal agency. So I'm pretty sure you can't launch something into outer space without, some kind of permits and formal plan with the government. So I don't know. I just kind of think the whole thing's kind of a wink, kind of a guy's going on, and this is really a very thinly disguised government operation, anyways. But that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I agree completely. And Jeff came out and raked the coals by saying that what was he saying? He basically said thanks to everyone who uses Amazon for all the money that I use to launch myself into space, and which kind of like adds to the ridiculousness of the whole situation. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Do you have another article we can talk about, Jack?
Sure do. And I tell you, this is probably, I think, one of the more interesting articles that I've picked up in quite a while, and it comes from a different source. I don't believe we've ever had anything on here from Cleveland.com. But, it talks about the urgency of getting the mom and pop stores back to work. And, we've kind of all heard the stories of, McDonald's, some of these big chains can't find people. Well, you have to think that, mom and pop stores are really struggling. So the article was kind of interesting. They talked about an entertainment district here in Cleveland. And, the one gentleman narrating the story talks about going in there and seeing somebody he knows used to be a high-powered IT executive. And, right away he's thinking the worst, and how uncomfortable this conversation is going to be when the guy comes over and is telling him what the soup of the day is, and the more he talks to the guy, it's really a matter of, the guy was doing it because he was trying to help out his friend who had a small business, couldn't find any help, and his take was that, well, I'm in there a couple of days a week anyways, I might as well help him out and do a little maitre d' and a little bartending, whatever he needs to keep the place up and running, and maybe you'll meet some new friends. And, I thought it was kind of an interesting take on it. Now, the other way I would look at this article is, that's the trouble that we have in society. Like right away, you see somebody there and you think the absolute worst. We let our perceptions take over right away. One of the best stories I think I've ever heard about this was, years ago, somebody goes into a bank, and I forget what they wanted the bank to do, but he was talking to the teller, and, a guy was dressed like a construction worker, a little bit dirty, and whatever it was, the bank couldn't do it. And he was fine with that. And then he just asked them to validate his parking. And, same teller gave him a real hard time about validating his parking. It's like, you're not giving anybody else a hard time. They just made the perception that he was some low-level menial labor job. He's like, okay, I'm yanking all my accounts. Well, it turns out the guy owned 2 construction companies, had, probably a couple of $1 million with that bank, and was pumping through a lot of transactions. But it just kind of shows. I mean, we see where somebody's working or how somebody's dressed, and right away we start filling in the blanks for these people. And you truly can't always judge a book by its cover. And was kind of curious to see which angle you got. There was a couple of different ways you could look at this article, so kind of want to see the angle you guys chose to take.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was really good and really interesting. And I think it makes a good point about when you're doing something that if you're there volunteering and doing something, it feels different as you're doing it, right? You might not take on a job that is that, but the fact that you're volunteering makes it feel different. You can kind of go at your own pace, that sort of thing. And so I think that kind of plays into it. But yeah, you're totally right. I mean, we make judgments, real quick based on what we see, and that's what we have to go on. And a lot of times that's wrong. I've seen it so much in my life about some of the richest people that I know. You wouldn't know by looking at them. And so I just think you can't tell. And, especially, the whole thing about the validating and stuff, that is silly. Like even if there is any difference in how much this money this guy would have, you would think there would just be some level of respect there, but yeah, what do you think, Ty?
Yeah. So, in looking at the discussion, I guess my thought, and I'm not sure this is the angle they took on it, so I'll kind of ask this question a little bit, but I thought about this exact thing in the sense of, in our area, in the Portland metro area, with people not going back into the office, there's a lot of mom and pop businesses that are around offices that are just closed, and they're not doing well because nobody's going into the office, and so they're not at lunchtime or just coffee time, either in the morning or in the afternoon or whatever. They're not patronizing some of those smaller kind of coffee shops, those kind of places to pick up lunch real quick, stuff like that. And so I don't know if they talked about that in the article, but I would say that our mom and pops need people to go back in the office for that reason, just because of the locations they're in. I mean, it's kind of a short-term need because the market geographically will reorganize itself, right? I mean, if people just aren't going into the offices, then artificially getting people to go in just so they can patronize those places is probably not super helpful. I think what's helpful is a settling down of what's it going to be. Are people going to be in centralized offices where mom and pop lunch spots and coffee spots and food carts and all that can operate around them, or are people going to be out in the suburbs and maybe the mom and pops need to be more kind of located out where the people are? I mean, people are still going to want to go out to coffee. They're going to want to go out to lunch. They're going to want to go to their food carts, but where they're going for that stuff is shifting depending on where they're at. Did they address that at all in the article?
Not really. I mean, that's like I say, yet another angle you could take on this, because like I say, this is Lakewood, but I could definitely see what you're saying in downtown Cleveland, people not going down in those offices. There's several mom and pops, little bakeries, whatever the case may be, that they get that downtown business. And when people go, when the sidewalks roll up at 6 downtown, that's it. That's when if they're not going down there, they're not making any money. So that's why I kind of thought this was kind of a cool article, because there's a lot of different angles that you could take looking at this. But yeah, I mean, it's just, and they're really challenged to try and get anybody to man these stores that they can. It was interesting. I had a restaurant that, that struggled through COVID, and, one of the things I saw was, he was probably 3 miles away from a big industrial park. And I'm like, my God, have you been over there handing out menus? I mean, are you doing lunch service over there daily? And that's where I think a lot of these, mom and pops, that you really have to be creative. If you just sit there and, you got to go to where the people are, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting take. Charlie, you got another one for us?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it kind of fits with the trend that we're establishing here, just constant change and everybody needing to adapt. I found this article in Windows Central called Microsoft predicts over 40% of people may quit their jobs this year. And so they produce this report each year called the Work Trend Index. And the 2021 release just came out, and like it said, predicts 41% drop of people considering leaving. It estimates that 64% of new employees with less than 1 year under their belt are struggling in their positions. And it gives 7 major findings. I won't go through them all, but some of the major findings that it found in the report was that it said that flexible, remote, and hybrid work arrangements aren't going to go anywhere. The report thinks that leaders are out of touch with their underlings and need a reality check. High productivity is an illusion, and the workforce behind it is very tired. Gen Z is being neglected and needs a helping hand. Authenticity is valuable, and talent can be found everywhere thanks to remote work, which kind of seems similar to the first one. But those are the major trends that they're seeing, and I guess I'm kind of trying to think about how this fits in with what you're saying in this last article. I mean, if the workplace is shifting and we also think that many people are going to be leaving their jobs in the next year, then we would expect that change to continue happening. And so I guess it's just more of a reminder for business owners to be ready to innovate anytime in the near future. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do those things that they're finding as what they call their findings seem to kind of ring true to you?
Yeah, I mean, talking to colleagues, both the business owners that are losing employees and talking to colleagues that are employees, and I see this in the market that people are leaving their jobs. There is a big kind of reset where people are leaving, and I think as an employer myself, it's been difficult to find enough people, or to really find people to bring on to our team for a growing business. And I try to reconcile that, because, if that's right, if there is such a large percentage of people that are leaving their jobs, that theoretically should mean that there's a lot of people looking for jobs, right? So, it seems like, ideally you're on the positive end of that. You're able to capitalize on, as an employer anyway, you might be able to capitalize on the fact that lots of people are looking for new work. unless it's just a shuffle, like you're losing people just as much as you're able to capitalize on the people looking for work, and which I think is most commonly the case. I think if you're an employer of any size, you're losing some people and you're trying to find people. So yeah, I think there's probably going to be a lot of, and from a business context, the other thing to think about on that is how much kind of transitional, kind of just transaction costs are involved here that are just kind of wasted from an economic perspective. If 40% are leaving their jobs and then ultimately moving into other jobs, there's a lot of lost productivity there, right? Because leaving a job, the process of just leaving, you're not the most productive as you're working out how you leave that job. And then when you first start a new job, you're not the most productive because you're learning new things and you're onboarding and stuff like that. So, if everybody's just kind of playing musical chairs in the economy, so to speak, it's not really the most productive scenario for the economy if everyone's just switching seats essentially. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that goes, or if it's like 40% are quitting their jobs and they're just not going back. That's a whole nother kind of issue, right? So yeah, those are some of my thoughts on it.
This is kind of interesting for me because I'm old enough to remember when, the only reason to get a job was to get paid and pay your bills and live. But oh my God, has it changed? Has it changed over the years a little bit? And it's, the other thing I think, Ty, like you're talking about the lost productivity, I would look at, my God, if you've got that kind of turnover, look at the recruiting costs. I mean, these, and the funny thing is everybody's recruiting right now. They're all out here looking for unicorns when all they really need is a plow horse. And they've put all that money into finding the perfect candidate who lasts 6 months and goes somewhere else. But it's really kind of interesting. It's just really, we were talking about that at the BNI meeting this morning. The workforce is getting younger and they've been trained and taught in a different way, and they're just not going to put up with a lot of you're just, because I said so isn't going to cut it with them. And it was really kind of interesting. I had breakfast with a young man who's not even 30 yet. But basically, his father's easing out of running the business. He's easing into running the business. He'd gone to some training, and he was kind of horrified when he went to a training class and was told, you really need to thank your employees when they do their job. And he's like, well, what? It's like, again, for me, I mean, saying thank you is getting that paycheck every week or every 2 weeks or whatever the case may be. That was always thanks enough for me. But this workforce today, they just don't cut it. If they don't feel appreciated, if they don't like the working conditions, if they don't feel like they're being listened to, at the drop of a hat, they'll leave. And I think, a lot of these employers were going to be, another key one's going to be, especially I think after this pandemic, if you're not offering at least some kind of quasi remote work for people, I think you're going to have a real hard time getting and retaining the best talent. And I think what it's proven is a lot of these jobs can be done remotely just fine. If you're not willing to embrace that concept as an employer, I think you're going to really struggle to get some of the top talent to work some of these jobs.
I want to pick up on something you said there, Jack, in terms of feeling appreciated, being thanked. It's interesting because I do hear that from kind of the younger generation, so to speak, than me in terms of the workforce. I've had that conversation with many people that, and with people that I mentor who don't necessarily work for me as well. So kind of a broad set of, and the thing that people will say that I hear being said is, well, I'm not motivated by the money. I want to feel that I'm valued and I want to feel appreciated for the work that I've done. And, hopefully I try to express that with my teams because I feel appreciation for the work that my team does. And I also know from experience that, paying people is like, for me as an employer, it's like the bare minimum. Like if I pay 5 people to do a job, they're not, ideally, if I'm lucky, all 5 are going to kind of reach some level of sufficiency for the money they get, right? But the performance and how they do that job is all going to vary, right? So I truly am appreciative. Like my team, across the board, everybody that I work with on my team is always doing doing more or providing a level of service, or there's something about that interaction that I have with them that I always do kind of feel is above and beyond just what I paid them for, kind of thing. And so I feel that appreciation. And, and I think, but there's another aspect to that. Just because I feel it as an employer doesn't mean they know that I feel it, unless I have some way of communicating that, right? Which I probably don't do perfectly or always the way I should. But I think kind of just circling back to the hearing people say, well, I care more about knowing that I've added value. I care more about the appreciation than just making the money. I hear them say that, but there's a cynic in me that's kind of like, well, yeah, but you're not really saying that I can pay you less, or that if your employer can pay you less as long as they appreciate you, are you? I mean, is that really where you sit? Do you really feel that way? And there's a cynical part of me that thinks like, no, that can't be the case. I mean, they have to get paid market, and then beyond that, they also want to be appreciated. That's really what they're saying. When they say money doesn't matter, my ears just can't accept that could be true. So I always assume that, well, yeah, money is like the baseline. Like, money matters, but they assume every employer is going to have to pay them, a fair market wage. And so beyond that, which employer they actually choose to stick with depends on feeling valued and appreciated, and that there's some path for them, kind of thing. That's the way I interpret what I hear people say anyway.
No, I think you've got it exactly right. It's just a more complicated, it's a multi-part kind of equation going on, and you've got both ends of it. And I think it each matters differently to each person. I know you know this, but just to kind of think about it out loud, I mean, I guess the people volunteering would be those who are truly speaking their piece when they say, I don't care about the money, I do this because of how it makes me feel. That would be if you do that, then you volunteer like the guy did in the last article. And as you said, that's not the case for the majority of tasks getting done. And so it's got to be what, the truth is, it's a balance of both. So yeah, I just think it's interesting stuff. Did you have another article we could talk about, Jack?
Oh yeah, I'm sure everybody will have opinion, because everybody does. Retailers facing a tough decision on masks again, and I think even since I posted this article, I think Apple's come out and said they need to, wear masks inside their store. And I know Disney World and Disneyland have said inside the park, if you're over 2, you have to wear a mask. It just keeps going back to I think where they shoot themselves in the foot. There's just this inconsistency of messaging, and these vague CDC things. I don't know if they need to be public pronouncements. I think they probably need to be funneled through somebody, because as the CDC, announces something public, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we're not doing that in this state, or wait a minute, they're doing that over there. It's the messaging on this is terrible. And now I see, the debate, and I don't know how much it's heating up in Portland. I think a lot of people are almost resigned to the fact that masks will be back. Maybe not shutdowns, but probably masks. And now you've got this whole pitting of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Now I'm almost of the opinion on that. It's your personal choice. You got vaccinated, and you should be safe with that. Don't worry about the unvaccinated. If they didn't get vaccinated, they get the virus. I mean, that's kind of going to be on them. But yeah, it's the constant changing in the messaging, and there's this, again, we're hitting another sector where the division that this is causing. But again, things like this with this this nebulous. Geez, the CDC said, well, I think the CDC needs to be funneling this through somebody who's either going to tell the entire public, make a pronouncement, everybody's going to go this way, or this is what we recommend, or not. I mean, they leak this, and then it's kind of open to interpretation, and that's where you have, states and different states and retailers coming up with their own policy that may or may not follow the CDC. I just think when you see things like this, it's the messaging that just continues to shoot them in the foot, and they're having a hell of a time getting their arms around it. And kind of thought, what you guys think about this art?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you were asking about here in the Portland area. I was hearing the other day that some restaurants and bars, venues are starting to ask people for proof of vaccination status. And, I've been very pro-vaccine, but I would find it annoying that I'd have to carry my vaccine card around. So, yeah, and I think the same thing about the mask thing is, it's just an unfortunate situation. I mean, I get it, and I'm generally conservative and pro being conservative about how you handle these things. And but I think my observation about this is that, we talk about governments may start having mask mandates, but not shutdowns. But I guess for somebody like me, and I know not everyone's like me, so fortunately the economy will benefit from the fact that not everyone's like me. But for me, it's like, well, if I have to wear a mask everywhere I go, then I'm less likely to want to go out as much, because the activity of going out for me is a marginal thing in the first place. Like, I'm not like, I don't want to go out so badly that I need to like go out and, wear a mask 8 hours a day so I can be going out. Right. So if it's like, and it's on a spectrum, right? I probably still wear a mask to go out some and occasionally, but where I might go out every single night, I'm probably not going to do that if I have to wear a mask every single night. I'm probably going to kind of slow down and do less of it. So I think I think we're fooling ourselves from an economy standpoint if we think that mask mandates are completely different than shutdowns. I think they do have some of the same effect in terms of shutdowns, in the sense that it does probably curb or reduce the amount of commercial activity that people going out. We were talking about in the article earlier about moms and pop stores need people to go back to work, and they need people out and about, right? And I think that mask mandates probably curb that. I'm making that as an observation. I'm not suggesting that a mask mandate shouldn't happen. I think that's above my pay grade. I'm not weighing in on whether it should happen or it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that if it does happen, it's naive to think that it has no impact on things from an economic standpoint. Oh yeah, people can just wear their masks every time they go into a venue, so it should have no impact. Well, yeah, it's going to have an impact, because some people like me are going to just be less likely to want to go out as much if I have to do that.
Yeah, no, I think you guys have covered most of the points on it. I guess the only thing I would say is that, it doesn't, I think there are people who fall either way. They either think we should be all using masks, or they think that we shouldn't have to use them at all. I just think nobody wanted this kind of middle of the road implementation where some people are going to do it their way and other people are going to do it their way. And then we can kind of maybe get hot spots going of COVID and maybe not. I just think if there's going to be government intervention, that's fine. If we've determined that's necessary, then okay, then we do government intervention in a way that works and is consistent and is, it just rational, really. And that doesn't always work because everyone has a different opinion on what is rational. But I just mean, if mask mandates matter, then it just feels like it should be applied in a uniform way so that we can use it, because the whole concept of masks is a bit of a group concept here. I mean, it only really works if, I guess it could still work a little bit on the lower end of the scale, but I mean, for the most part, we're trying to establish this like herd immunity of all of us wearing masks. And I feel like if 10% of people choose not to, it seems like it would actually be worse than a 10% drop in effectiveness, because those allow the rest to basically get sick, I guess would be the idea. So I don't know. I'm personally vaccinated and not wearing a mask at this, recently. And so my actions don't really line up with that, but I just feel like, yeah, there's got to be some sort of uniformity. It feels like, so kind of on the same note, I've got another article we can talk about. Just speaking of uniformity, there's an article in KGW called "Portland is down to one full-time traffic officer as speeding tickets plummeted." And then it talks about how there were 35 officers for Portland in 2009, and that had gone down to about 18 over time pre-pandemic. And now they're down to one, who happens to be a guy named Ty Engstrom. And basically, actually total citations were down like 80%. And I can only speak from my experience here driving around, but I will say that it does seem like people are driving differently or more aggressively or more recklessly, at least in my personal experience. I don't drive as much as I used to, so that might not be a great sample size to look at, but it just feels a little bit lawless if you drive around Portland right now. Everybody's just kind of doing their own thing. There is an RV, just to give you an example, there's an RV abandoned in the middle of 11th, which is a pretty major street here in Portland. And it's just stopped in the middle of the road, just totally abandoned, and nobody's doing anything about it. And so I guess I want to get your guys' take. Ty, do you have that same experience? Do you feel like Portland has abandoned traffic law? And then Jack, is this happening where you're at, or is this a Portland phenomenon?
In my neighborhood in the Portland area, I haven't noticed much of a change. I don't think there was a lot of traffic enforcement in my neighborhood at all anyway. I mean, I think that what I see is there's community organizing that goes on. So there'll be this campaign where there'll be a bunch of signs put up around the streets that say, hey, go slower. Or I think there's a sign that says 20's enough Portland or something like that to try to keep the speed down in the neighborhoods and stuff like that. But there's some streets in my neighborhood, and I think that's probably true in a lot of neighborhoods, where they're notorious for being places where people are bypassing main thoroughfares by going through neighborhood streets, and they do so at a pretty good clip. And it's not, it's way beyond what it should be for a neighborhood area or beyond what the speed limit is. And I've never really seen a lot of robust enforcement that prevents that. So yeah, I don't think it's, I don't think I notice it any more now than it has been for years. But it was, I think there was that there in Portland, there was that news release that there was only one police officer, right, that available to enforce traffic, as we're talking about this. And so, I mean, just that statement is just sounds dramatic. But yeah, in practice, I don't know that I feel like it's worse than it was before. I feel like it's always kind of been not well enforced, period.
Well, it's one of those articles where you got to thank the genius that proclaimed that there's only one traffic cop. It's like the Wild West is here. Have at it, guys. There's nobody there to stop you. It's kind of interesting in Cleveland, and I don't know if you have this out in Portland or not, but some of these municipalities will try to go with the traffic cameras. And from what I've heard is it's not enforceable even if you get one. I guess most people will pay because it's a little unnerving to keep getting reminders from a law enforcement agency that you got caught speeding and you owe this money, whether it is or whether it isn't. But I know there's one where it's, you'd swear it should be a 35 mile an hour zone. It's a 25 mile an hour zone, and they'll park cars with cameras there that'll take pictures of speeders. They'll throughout town, you'll see these your speed is, and kind of trying to monitor, which I think those kind of things are good from the standpoint of you're really trying to get people to not drive recklessly, not speed. So those kind of things are deterrents. Unfortunately, I've been putting in a lot of highway time, and no matter what state you're in, the highway patrol is always there every few miles or so with the car parked, waiting to grab the speeder. And sometimes you wonder why. It's almost like shooting fish in a barrel. Take your pick. What'd you do? Grab the slowest one or the last one the easiest one to catch, because pretty much everybody was speeding. But I don't know. Do you have those type? And I know some municipalities, people have fought it in court, and the traffic cameras get ruled unconstitutional, and they have to take them down after they spend a lot of money. It's kind of funny. You'll go through these different municipalities, and you'll see the newer traffic lights, and they'll all have the light there for the camera, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's functioning, but it could be put in place at any point in time, and it may not be at every intersection, maybe just certain ones. But it's, again, if nothing else, it's kind of a deterrent. I don't know does Portland have anything like traffic cameras and park cars like that, and your speed is types of signs. Do they have any other deterrents other than somebody writing tickets?
Yeah, we're definitely big on that. We've got a lot of those down here. And sometimes, I don't know if Ty's experienced this, but I've had ones where they'll flash you like you're getting a ticket and you'll, the thing will go off, and then you'll just get nothing in the mail. But it's happened to me like 2 or 3 times. And, I've renewed, no issue and anything. So I believe I'm not getting any tickets, but it'll just like kind of warn you. And I always thought to myself, that's actually really smart if you think about it, because if they can just get a flash thing, a thing up there that just warns you, reminds you, gets you scared, gets you thinking about it, but nobody gets pulled over, nobody's actually losing money, just a reminder. It's like I could see that, that's kind of like a better version of a stop sign, different purpose, but a good way to add safety while not creating interactions. I think the failure of that, Ty, I've seen those signs you're talking about, the 20 is plenty, but the thing is you have to pronounce, in order for it to rhyme, you have to pronounce 20 really weird, like 20 is plenty. And I think that's the problem. That's why everybody's just driving willy-nilly around here, because, your slogans don't even work. So yeah, that's what I've got on it.
Moral of the story, your jingle better not suck or people won't follow it.
Yeah, we already had click it or ticket. Wait, how many traffic related jingles do we need? Jeez.
Thank you for joining us on another broadcast of the YouTube show and podcast, None of Our Businesses. 3 accountants breaking it down for you. That's why you have to tune in every week, because you never know what the articles are going to be, and you never know what angle we're going to take. And if you're interested, check out our sister channel with Profitless on Purpose. Everything that has to do with nonprofit. And they do the same thing over there. You've got accountants breaking down the topics. You never know what you're going to get. That's why you need to tune in every week. Like us, share us, tell your friends, colleagues, family about us. We'll see you back here next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.